Another massive industry in China is about to collapse. In 2025, the global average price for energy storage systems fell by about 31% year-on-year, and China's market is especially hard hit. The bidding price for energy storage systems has already dropped to about 0.4 yuan per watt-hour, which is nearly the lowest price that can still cover costs. On January 7th, multiple departments of the Chinese government held a symposium on the energy storage battery industry, signaling the start of the so-called anti-involution movement for energy storage in 2026. Involution is a new buzzword about China's economy. It refers to excessive and self-defeating competition among Chinese companies for limited resources and opportunities. Industry insiders say that the situation in China's energy storage sector is not looking good, and the price war is spreading quickly. Major companies like CATL and BYD are involved in bidding, and low prices have become the norm. Right now, China's energy storage industry has only one option left: to flood overseas markets. However, this path of exporting overseas is also about to be blocked. To ensure public safety, the Trump administration is prioritizing the removal of Chinese-made batteries from the US market, starting with drones. According to Nikkei Asia, both SES AI and Amprius Technologies have announced that they have decided to expand their battery cell production in South Korea. This comes ahead of the U.S. National Defense Authorization Act, which will prohibit the Department of Defense from procuring Chinese-made batteries starting in October 2027. In addition, President Trump signed an executive order last July, requiring federal agencies to expedite the approval process for American drone manufacturers and protect the U.S. drone supply chain from foreign influence. SES AI, based in Boston, has already modified its production lines at its factory in Cheongju, South Korea. Initially set up for EV battery production, the factory will now focus on producing battery cells for drones and electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. The factory, built in 2021, has an annual output of up to 1 million battery cells. In the future, the production capacity could even increase to 1 gigawatt-hour, which is comparable to the company's capacity in China. Founder of SES, Chi Hao-hu, stated that the company is shifting its focus to South Korea in response to a series of U.S. policies and investments aimed at developing the domestic drone industry. The White House stated last year that the U.S. must accelerate the commercialization of domestic drone technology, fully integrate it into the national airspace system, reduce reliance on foreign suppliers, and ensure that this critical technology is in the hands of the American people. Meanwhile, Amprius Technologies announced last December that due to a sales increase in the third quarter of the previous year, the company will also increase its production in South Korea. Amprius has added 3 new contract manufacturers in South Korea, which means the company now has as many contract factories in South Korea as it does in China. Amprius Technologies CEO Tom Stepien said that while the South Korean factories currently only serve U.S. government customers, other customers are becoming increasingly interested in non-China-made batteries. Many bipartisan members of the U.S. Congress have long sounded the alarm over the potential security threats posed by Chinese batteries. They warned that the U.S. could become seriously dependent on Chinese-made equipment. Additionally, these devices may have vulnerabilities that put the energy grid at risk. According to data from the energy think tank Ember, China's total exports of batteries, including those for EVs and energy storage, reached $66.76 billion in the first 10 months of 2025, setting a new historical high. According to rankings from renewable energy and tech consulting firm Infolink, the top 6 battery cell suppliers in the world all come from China. These include CATL, Lithium, Eve Energy, BYD, CALB, and Rept Batero. The only non-Chinese company in the global top 10 is Japan's major automotive battery company, AESC Group. The China Electric Vehicle Industry Technology Innovation Strategic Alliance, CAEV, pointed out that in the first 11 months of 2025, China's exports of electric storage and other non-vehicle batteries grew by 51.4% year-on-year, which was a faster growth rate than electric vehicle battery exports, which grew by 40.6%. This all happens against the backdrop of a $5 billion plan launched by the Chinese government, which aims to nearly double battery storage capacity by 2027, alongside new provincial subsidies. However, industry insiders say that the competition in China's energy storage sector will be even fiercer than in photovoltaics for 3 key reasons. First, the speed of the price war is spreading faster. The price war in photovoltaics lasted several years, gradually being fought down. But in energy storage, leading companies with large production capacities and financial backing entered the market directly, using extreme low prices to quickly crush the target prices across the country. This impact was quick and intense. Second, the issue of overcapacity may be even more severe. A critical data comparison is needed. The overcapacity in photovoltaics is because China's component production capacity can meet global demand until 2032. But in 2024, global energy storage capacity is around 3 terawatt-hours, while global demand is only 1 terawatt-hour, meaning capacity is 3 times the demand. This sharp supply-demand imbalance will push companies to trigger even fiercer price wars in order to maintain capacity utilization. Third, the competition dimensions have evolved, making the situation more complex. Early photovoltaic competition was mainly about reducing costs through technology, but this technical premium was quickly overwhelmed by capacity expansion, turning products into undifferentiated commodities. In energy storage, the competition has already surpassed simple hardware price wars. Now it's about high-end system integration capabilities, software algorithms, and lifecycle cost control. This means the requirements for a company's comprehensive abilities are higher, and the complexity of competition has increased. Clearly, a massive industry built by the Chinese government is facing severe overcapacity and is threatening the world. Most critically, the supply chain risks and potential technical security vulnerabilities of battery cells are spreading to the member countries of the global industrial system, especially the US. Fortunately, the US has already been alert to this. On June 7, 2024, John Molinar, chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, along with several U.S. House members, jointly initiated a bill called the Decoupling from Foreign Adversarial Battery Dependence Act. The bill seeks to prohibit the U.S. Department of Homeland Security from purchasing batteries from the 6 Chinese companies mentioned above, and aims to promote decoupling from geopolitical rivals in the supply chain. On March 10, 2025, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the act with a voice vote, with no opposition. The bill was introduced by Republican Representative Carlos Jimenez, who stated before the vote that the Chinese Communist Party seeks to gain influence in critical global industries, and the U.S. must be at the forefront of resisting the CCP and decoupling from it. As the U.S. becomes increasingly dependent on battery technology, it is essential to ensure that these batteries come from non-adversarial countries. Jimenez is a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security and the House Select Committee on the CCP. There, he has long focused on China-related issues and has introduced several bills addressing the threat posed by the CCP. Democratic Representative Lou Correa, also a member on the House Committee of Homeland Security, stated that the bill aims to confront America's global adversaries and prevent the CCP from compromising U.S. homeland security. Industry experts point out that unlike Chinese EV companies, which have yet to enter the U.S. market, Chinese batteries have had a strong presence in the U.S. Customs data shows that from 2020 to 2024, the U.S. was the largest destination for Chinese lithium battery exports for 5 consecutive years. However, by 2025, due to the U.S.'s efforts to reduce reliance on China, Germany has overtaken the U.S. as the largest destination for Chinese lithium battery exports. The U.S. plans to ban Chinese batteries from entering the Department of Defense by October 2027, which coincides with the CCP's original plan to establish global control over the battery supply chain by that year. At the same time, the Trump administration is accelerating measures to ban Chinese batteries from drones, which will prevent the CCP from weaponizing the energy storage sector, as it had with the rare earth supply chain. On December 22nd of the previous year, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission announced that it would place Chinese drone giants such as DJI and Autel on the National Security Risk List and ban the sales of new models in the U.S. Members of Congress expressed that DJI drones have been a significant security threat to the U.S. for years, and they cannot be allowed to continue threatening national security. The FCC cited upcoming major events, including the 2026 World Cup, America 250 celebrations, and the 2028 Los Angeles Summer Olympics. The FCC says that these events are reasons for addressing potential drone threats from criminals, hostile foreign actors, and terrorists. Based on a White House interagency review, the FCC determined that Chinese drones pose risks of unauthorized surveillance and sensitive data leakage, and formally placed them on the restricted list. This means that any new products released by DJI will be unable to obtain FCC certification, and will be entirely banned from entering the U.S. market. In response to the ban, DJI expressed disappointment, claiming that 80% of the 1,800 law enforcement and emergency response agencies across the U.S. use its products. The ban would impact public safety. However, under the CCP's national intelligence law and other legal provisions, all Chinese social organizations, enterprises, and citizens are required to cooperate with national intelligence efforts. Concerns have arisen that data collected by drones may be requested by the CCP. Republican Representative Rick Crawford praised the FCC's decision, calling it the right step. He described the widespread entry of Chinese drones into the U.S. airspace as a counterintelligence nightmare, stating that the U.S. cannot continue to trade national security for cheap goods. This move also aligns with President Trump's America First strategy. Sebastian Gorka, Senior Director for Terrorism at the White House National Security Council, stated on X that this action is meant to ensure supply chain security. He wrote, "Drones are a large part of America's future security. They must be made in the USA." Although DJI is a Chinese company, 80% of its revenue comes from markets outside China, primarily in North America and Europe. According to Voice of America, about 80% of consumer drones in the U.S. come from DJI. Additionally, according to data from the Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International, Chinese drones control 92% of the American emergency medical drone market. Experts say that many tests and studies have shown that DJI drones collect and store GPS locations, high-resolution images, terrain data, flight paths, and operator information, and may even have hidden backdoors. These drones could be used to spy on military camps, ports, airports, power grids, communications facilities, and other critical infrastructure, creating high-precision 3D terrain models for combat target databases. Experts say that it is no surprise that the U.S. is banning new DJI drones. The U.S. has long been highly alert to China's use of the Internet and various electronic devices for intelligence infiltration. Drones are one of the most direct and highest-risk methods. In the future, the U.S. will likely conduct a full review and block these potential leak channels. More countries are expected to follow similar bans. Why did the U.S. decide to take action now? The U.S. has likely found a supply chain system that can replace DJI drones, significantly reducing its reliance on China. This also explains why Taiwanese drones have been performing well in the market, as Taiwan is likely taking on the market demand previously dominated by DJI. Experts say that banning DJI is just the first step. As Taiwan's drone industry capacity gradually comes online, coupled with technological cooperation, Taiwan could become an important production base for drones. Industry estimates suggest that if key components and core technologies are in place, Taiwan could have the chance to establish large-scale drone production capabilities within 3 to 5 years. Another expert stated that the current U.S. policy is to eliminate Chinese equipment from communication and surveillance networks at all costs. The goal is to prevent the red supply chain from leaking any sensitive information. He added that drones are a critical battleground for countries in the future. Taiwan is actively developing its drone industry, and areas around Chiayi in Taiwan have already become industrial hubs. As countries around the world begin to exclude Chinese drones, there will be significant demand for alternatives. The expert further explained that Taiwan already has considerable capabilities in the small civilian drone sector. It is also capable of producing large attack drones and loitering munition drones independently. While there is still a gap in large drones like the Predator, demands for that type of drone is limited. In contrast, the international demand for small drones used in police work, disaster relief, and emergency response is much greater, and this is where Taiwan has a competitive edge. The U.S. stance is also influencing its allies. In December 2025, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police announced that it had restricted the use of its 973 Chinese-made drones to non-sensitive missions only. The RCMP stated that the primary reason for this restriction is the high security risks associated with their country of origin. Out of the 1,230 remotely piloted aircraft systems used by the RCMP, about 80% are Chinese-made. These drones are used to monitor the U.S.-Canada border and performing various law enforcement tasks. Information from Europe indicates that EU countries are increasingly aware of the threat posed by the CCP. According to a report by the Financial Times on January 17th, the European Union plans to ban Chinese suppliers from participating in critical infrastructure projects within the EU. The report cited EU officials, stating that Brussels plans to promote a phased elimination of Chinese-made equipment in EU critical infrastructure. It would ban companies like Huawei and ZTE from participating in the construction and operation of EU telecom networks, solar systems, and security scanners. Reuters reported that the European Commission, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, Huawei, and ZTE have yet to respond to the matter. According to insiders, the EU cybersecurity proposal aims to change the previous voluntary system. It would turn the restrictions on high-risk suppliers into mandatory rules that all EU member countries must follow. In 2020, the EU adopted the 5G Network Security Toolbox, identifying Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE as high national security risks. In recent years, countries like Germany and Sweden have followed suit, banning the use of Chinese suppliers' equipment, while countries like Spain and Greece have continued to allow related equipment into their networks. The Cybersecurity Act indicates that scattered individual national solutions are insufficient to build a trust system and collaborative mechanisms that cover the entire market. This indicates that the EU is determined to completely eliminate the threat of Chinese Communist Party influence in communications and electronic equipment, even if it means implementing mandatory policies and bearing economic costs. However, there are discordant voices. Recently, the Canadian government announced that it would allow up to 49,000 Chinese EVs to be imported at a low tariff of 6.1%. This news caused a huge stir. U.S. cabinet officials stated that this move by the Canadian government is problematic and that it might soon regret the decision. Furthermore, the backlash from within Canada has been even more intense. On January 19th, Ontario Premier Doug Ford publicly criticized the recent electric vehicle agreement between Prime Minister Mark Carney and Beijing.
When you get on your cell phone, it's the Chinese that are going to be listening to your telephone conversation.
He sarcastically remarked, calling it Huawei 2.0, bringing Huawei back into Canada, which would result in nothing but potential job losses in various departments of factories, with nothing gained in return. Ford also questioned whether the U.S. would allow Chinese vehicles to cross the border. Analysts suggest that despite some differences in policy details, the U.S. and its allies share a consensus on the Chinese Communist Party's ambitions and threats. Even though there may be some dissent, the CCP can no longer infiltrate and operate freely in countries as it did 5 years ago. For the CCP, this could be the last attempt to control the global supply chain, and now it faces the failure of yet another industry that cannot absorb the severe overcapacity within its domestic market.